Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to BiblioTech on Air. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
I'm Lewis.
And I'm Romeo.
And today, well, first off, thank you for joining us for our first Libros and Libations of the year. So thank you for that. Hope everyone had a decent new year. So we're going to get started. This book is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. It is a book about basically a Chinese American family living in the 70s in Midwest America.
I think so.
Kind of dealing with those struggles. A little summary for y'all. Lydia is dead, but they don't know this yet. So begins this exquisite novel about a Chinese American family living in the 1970s small town Ohio. Lydia is the favorite child of Marilyn and James Lee, and her parents are determined that she will fulfill the dreams that they were unable to pursue. But when Lydia's body is found in the local lake, the delicate balancing act that has been keeping the Lee family together is destroyed, tumbling them into chaos. A profoundly moving story of family, secrets, and longing. Everything I Never Told You is both a gripping page-turner and a sensitive family portrait, uncovering the ways in which mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, husbands and wives struggle, all their lives to understand one another.
So generational trauma.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Great synopsis. Did you write it yourself?
I did, thank you. I worked on that right before coming in here.
Yeah, so I have some questions. Some of them are kind of redundant, so we'll kind of skip through as needed. I don't have this actually as a question, but we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, and I kind of want to get y'all's thoughts. So the book starts off with Lydia, the death of Lydia, should we say?
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I was like, oh, like murder mystery, this is gonna be cool. Like it's gonna be a really good book, And then of course the author jumps around. It's like going from past to present to future and stuff, or not future, just past and present. But I guess what were y'all's thoughts on the start of the book, and then just kind of the direction it went from there?
Yeah, I'd say kind of like how you said. At first, it made it seem like it was gonna be like a who done it, or what's like the gritty dark thing that really happened.
Yeah.
What's got this town in a chokehold? But it just kind of boiled back to generational trauma.
Yeah.
I completely skipped over the part where they said she was dead, so I didn't know she was dead. So like 50% into the book, I was like, man, she's just missing, right? Like, where is she?
And you didn't read the synopsis where
I
it
did
starts
not read
with Lydia is dead?
Yeah, I did not. So I had to read the synopsis, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's dead." Okay, now let's go.
Yourself.
Let's go from here now.
I thought it was going to be a murder mystery sort of thing going into it, and I guess it I was disappointed that it wasn't, but I also think it's kind of a little bit cool to play devil's advocate a little bit here. I think it's like a little bit cool that it kind of starts itself with like everyone has their suspicions of what happened and everybody wants to get to the bottom of it, but it is just a sad thing that happened, and what they're working towards is just accepting that it happened instead of finding out that like, oh my god, it was Jack, or like the police are covering something up. Like, no, it just happened, and them anything that they do in terms of theorizing is just them working through the denial part of grief.
Sure.
It
was certainly a nice hook. That's how you get the reader right
for
away.
sure.
I was like, oh man, it's starting off with a bang.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad book. It's not what I'm saying either. We can talk about that at the end, but I was like, oh, okay, great. And then it just kind of, for me, it was like, kind of dipped down a little bit. But okay. So the title of the book suggests that the characters are holding back important truths. What secrets are the characters keeping from one another, and how do these secrets shape their actions and relationships?
They don't talk to each other at all.
Yeah,
man.
there's so many secrets.
Like I was saying this to y'all, but like it is very of the time period, and I feel like nowadays we have like a better grasp on like more like how valuable therapy is, family therapy, stuff like that. So like seeing them not talk to each other makes sense for the time period, but it's also like just tell each other what you're actually thinking, because like whenever James hears Marilyn say some things that are like offensive to him because he's Chinese American, when he hears things like that, he doesn't call her out for them. He just feels that and is like, okay, yeah, she doesn't value me, like she hasn't valued me all along, because I'm Chinese American. And he doesn't express that to her, so she doesn't realize that that's what he thinks.
Yeah.
So they start getting into like resentment for each other.
Yeah.
And they don't realize why.
Yeah.
Because they don't talk to each other.
Absolutely.
It's so crazy how like people wait until the person's gone or dead or things like that to really start to get to know them. Like it kind of reminded me of like I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, when she was like learning about her sister when she was gone or whatever. And I'm like, man, that's so crazy. Like I don't know. It just makes you think, like, you wait until that person's gone to
Mhm.
then start being like, oh, they were actually going through this or this and that. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was honestly, I didn't think that they were gonna have those revelations about Lydia. But at the end, you see the mom realizing, like, oh, I put too much pressure on her. And then you see, like, them kind of tell the dad, like, you would tell her to be everything and just, be this people pleaser, be very accommodating.
Yeah.
They didn't, like you said, they didn't realize that till the end. I didn't think they were going to get to that point. But the fact that they did, I was like, oh, okay, at least that's something good that's happening. They're realizing
Yeah.
we put everything on her and she did not deserve that.
So let me ask you a question. This is off script a little bit, but I asked everybody last night at the book club. So who do you think was harboring the biggest secret? I mean, because James was having an affair.
Oh, no, Jack.
Jack, I guess they allude to the fact that Jack was in love with Nate,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And then, Lydia was, all the pressures on her. She couldn't admit to her mom and her parents that that's not what she wanted to do. I just for, I guess, my perspective, I told you this, Louis, earlier. I think that Hannah was holding on to the biggest secret because she had so many secrets.
She knew everything.
She knew everything. She was very observant. She heard it. She was hiding under tables and she was just off in the corner. So she heard everybody and saw everything. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
That's what I think. I think Hannah, she just, like you said, so observant. She knew everything. She knew the fact that Jack was harboring feelings for Nate. She knew that
That's right. She did. Yep.
Lydia didn't want her to end up like her. She knew just kind of by that one thing between James that, he was having the affair. I think did they mention if she knew like the mom was kind of like resentful of the family in a way? Because I think that's the one thing they didn't
That she
quite.
didn't know.
I don't
But she
think-
might have had maybe like suspicions that like mom doesn't like us or something.
Correct. I don't think they ever flat out, or the author never said it, but I think, again, because she was like the vessel, she heard Ed saw everything. I think she probably maybe had an idea.
Yeah.
I don't know,
And
though.
she saw Lydia leaving at night. She saw the parents when they got into a fight. She was right under that table. Like she saw everything.
Yeah.
Usually being the youngest, I feel like you do tend to see a lot of things. And be the more quiet as well. Like, just keep it all to yourself.
It's kind of funny because usually you see the youngest as being like the most spoiled.
Correct.
But this was like the complete opposite of that, which I thought was interesting. She was absolutely ignored, neglected.
It really depends on the situation that you're in, but like I feel like especially if there's like, there's tension between the parents and like the older siblings who are supposed to be the more responsible ones, they may not get after you as much because you're the youngest and therefore have like the least like responsibility on your shoulders, but you still watch them get after your older siblings. I'm speaking from experience. I am the youngest in my family and I saw a lot of that, but also I feel like a lot of the kind of like silent resentment for Hannah, at least partially, comes from the fact that Marilyn was like about to go finish college and the thing that got in the way was her pregnancy with Hannah. So like it's always been kind of like this unspoken like Lydia's the favorite, Nath is there and he's supposed to be the most responsible, so we'll get after him on things. And Hannah, well, she's just a kid and like she doesn't have any thoughts about what's going on. And Hannah kind of like notices that and is very sensitive to that and is like, okay, like I'm not wanted to be seen or heard, or like my opinion does not matter, and she just kind of hides herself away and watches everything and says nothing.
Yeah. It's pretty sad. It's rare when the middle child gets all the attention, right? But in this case, Lydia was certainly getting all that attention. So how do the characters in the novel struggle with their sense of identity, especially in relation to race and cultural expectations?
It's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, with them being Chinese American, I obviously can't speak for that experience.
Sure.
But from what we see, see in these like stories that play out, typically they have to be, kind of like that perfect child, which is, there's a lot of similarities with like Latino culture sometimes where, you are viewed to be like that perfect child. Like you want to, go above and beyond. You need to be like a doctor, a lawyer, or some of these top jobs, and that's, a lot of that was Marilyn's projection onto Lydia, but I do still think like their race played a factor in that.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
No, just especially James too, being like a Chinese immigrant, and then that he had to like buy or go under a pseudonym too. And then the fact that he ended up in Western American culture, like teaching that as a class too.
Yeah.
It
Cowboys.
just says a lot about him and his background. Like he was really, I feel like he was really trying to like,
That was part of his assimilation, I think, because
Yeah.
he made it a point. Didn't need to like look for the most American thing
Yeah.
to teach, and it was like, oh, cowboys, okay.
mhm,
Yeah, and he was just, I feel like that plays into so much of his baggage as a parent also, because he wants his kids to have a better life than he did. He wants them to grow up in a way where they don't face as much discrimination and bullying, and that they get more opportunities than he did. Even though they are Chinese American, I feel like a lot of what he wants as a parent is just to make sure that his children are well liked, which he wasn't. And I feel like he especially projects that a lot onto Nath because he sees, like, he resents how much he sees himself in Nath, and he just wants to like shape him out to be like this like American man, you know, without really without really considering the fact that like it's not gonna, like, no matter how much he tries, there's gonna be like an end point to how like fit, like how much they can fit in by societal standards, and putting that kind of pressure on Nath is not gonna be healthy for him, you know.
So that's a good segue to my next question. So for context, before I ask the question, you got to think about when James, the father, was growing up. So the book takes place in 78, right? But the dad ideally was probably a kid in the 50s, early 60s, or at least a teen around that time. Anyways, that's post World War II, you know, Japanese resentment, right? And then you're talking about the heightened Vietnam War, right? You know, so Americans' perception, I should say, and flat out racism of Asian Americans and Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans just was at an all-time high, right? So I kind of felt for the dad. I didn't side with him because he was, you know, having an affair and stuff. But at the same time, like I just felt for him in the sense that this guy was trying to find his identity the whole time to try to prove that he was more American than an American, right? So James, as one of the few Asian American professors in a predominantly white community, faces racial discrimination. How does his experience of racism shape his identity and his relationships with others, especially his family?
I feel like as a husband, he takes a lot of that insecurity from real discrimination that he has faced. I feel like he takes a lot of that into his marriage, and again, because they don't talk to each other very much, in terms of like deep emotion, he kind of just like lets it fester of like, well, Marilyn's mom thought this of me, and she must be like, eventually Marilyn is going to realize that her mom was right. And that we shouldn't have married because I'm too different, you know?
Yeah.
And instead of talking with Marilyn and having her reassure him that like she's never seen him that way, he just lets it sit. And a lot of that, I feel like he brings that sort of insecurity into the marriage by being like, every little thing is like a sign of like, okay, the other shoe just dropped. Marilyn does actually hate me. Like the truth is coming out, instead of having gotten reassurance from his wife, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. But you kind of see that also in the affair that he has with Louisa. Because at first, I wasn't quite sure if it was going to pan out in that direction. It seemed like maybe there's that kinship, and that's what he was just kind of seeking with her. But then, like you said, the more he got in his own head, the more he just kind of started getting into that mindset of like, I'm not good enough for Marilyn, you know, I'll never be good enough for her. He kind of saw, I guess, that validation of like, you know, here's another Asian American woman who understands what I'm probably going through.
Yeah, I mean,
Let me go seek comfort in that on the day of the funeral.
20 years his junior too, though, right? Just somebody that I thought that was a little bit perplexing, that he wanted to live the American dream, married a white woman, had it all seemingly, and then all of a sudden was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to an Asian American woman, but then it's like, I'm not satisfied with that either. I just think the dude was never satisfied with his life at all. Period. He never was, which is
maybe he wanted to go back to his roots a bit,
maybe,
and that's what he used Louisa for,
and just be accepted for who he was. Period.
Yeah, I mean, she did like cook him the like that like during like many like a month or so into the affair, however long it had been. Like she cooks him the bao, and he like, that's right at the breaking point where he's just confronted Marilyn, being like, okay, I guess I never was good enough for you. Maybe we should have never married. And he goes there, and the first thing that Louisa does is like, hey, I made you this food that is important to like that is important to Chinese culture. Like, it is a very, like, it is a staple dish. And he's just like, okay, not only should I have never married Marilyn, but this is what I could have been missing all this time.
Yeah.
Like, connecting with my roots, having something that reminds me of my family that doesn't feel shameful, having someone else who understands the experience of being an Asian American. And I feel like that is what makes him say, like, to her, like, you're the sort of woman that I should have married, because he's just like looking at her, and he doesn't actually mean that, but he's just like, I should have. He has a longing for being whole with his identity that he's been keeping, like, under wraps to try to fit in for so long that it just kind of breaks at that moment.
Yeah. So do you think that the marriage between, do you think Marilyn and James's marriage could have survived if they had communicated more openly about their struggles? We talked about communication, but do you think it's that simple, like just communication? What do y'all think about that?
Would have been a good start.
Yeah.
Would have for sure been a good
Probably.
start.
Okay.
But I feel like they had a lot of unsettled stuff that they needed to deal with too.
Like their own personal
Yeah.
baggage.
They needed therapy. Like, I know it's the late 70s and no, everybody thought therapy was a bad word, man, but they needed therapy so bad. Like, they I feel like they had a very good marriage for a while. They seem to complete each other, they seem to comfort each other, they seem to be on the same page with each other. But I feel like what happened in terms of James is he, like, at some point there's that line where he's like, he forgot that his wife was a creature of want. And I feel like that happens to a startling amount of couples as they get older, is that they just forget to check in with each other about, do you have any new goals in life? Do you have any new desires? Is this still what you want to be doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
know?
because people don't stay the same
Yeah.
like their whole entire life. They're both changing as individuals, you know? So whether you're going to stay together and explore, like, I don't know, sometimes you need that break. Like, Lydia had to go off. She had to ditch her kids and her family to find herself a little bit.
Yeah, people do go down, I guess, different paths, right? As couples, but like you mentioned, right? Communication is certainly a start. Like communicating with your partner that, hey, like I don't have those dreams and ambitions and goals anymore. Like I'm kind of leaning more toward this, and maybe it might catch them off guard a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, you told me, now I kind of know, right? I know what you're looking forward to or whatever. Just having those conversations, I think it certainly would have helped. I don't think it would have, made a world of difference, maybe, but certainly would have helped.
And she saw that really came to fruition for her when she saw Jack's mom in the hospital, because she was a doctor, and of course that's such a male-dominated field for a long time, and she kind of, same thing, got in her own head about, like, I can't do this, this is just men. But then when she saw Dr. Wolf, it was kind of like, I could actually do this thing that I wanted to do for such a long time.
Absolutely.
It's a very real possibility now. And I think that was kind of like that tipping point for her.
For sure. It kind of made her lose herself a little bit for good reason, right? Seeing that and being like, man, that could be me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Jack a little bit. I don't have this as a question, but we've talked about Jack. So Jack is the, I don't know, he's like the friend, I guess, of Lydia, but there's, at first, the author gives you she alludes to the fact that, like, they're going to become, like, friends with benefits, I guess, right? Because Jack is supposedly, like, sleeping with all these other women. He has a box of condoms in his car and stuff like that. So, but ultimately it comes out that Jack is in love with Nath, right? So what did you all see that coming? What do you think about Jack as a character?
I totally saw that coming. I'm sorry, my gaydar was going off. Because every single time that he would talk to Lydia, he'd be like, how's Nath? What does Nath feel about this? When's Nath coming home? And I'm like, is he... okay. But I was like, man, I think I'm just, like, thinking about that. Maybe he's just, like, really hurt by the fact that Nath sees him as, like, a really bad person. And, like, he's just like, man, I've always wanted to be friends, and I see that he's going through a tough time. No, he just had a crush on him.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, probably felt the other thing too, but, like, he had a crush on him, and I was just like, oh my God, I kind of knew it, but also, like, man, the fact that Lydia it's the late 70s, and the fact that Lydia took it as, quote unquote, as well as she did was crazy, because she wasn't even like, oh, you're gay, that's a problem. She was just like, oh, you don't like me, and I was really trying to make this a thing to, like, get back at Nath and, like, express myself, and now that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
I think it was like, she was so, like you mentioned, Lydia was super cool with it. Like, she wasn't like, ew, gay.
Yeah.
But like, I guess she was so, like, understanding of people being pegged into a hole, that for seeing Jack be someone outside of the norm, she was like, oh wow, that's cool. That's maybe she was like, that's something that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think she
I don't know if
just
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
it makes sense, but do you think that maybe she was so accepting just because she loves Nate that much? Because they talk about how she was like hurt when he was leaving and she always wanted to kind of please Nate and be close to him. So maybe it was less about Jack being gay and more about just like, I love my brother, I don't care. There was some reviews that I read online where actually some people were saying they thought Nate was gay as well because he had so much hate toward Jack, and they're like, maybe he was.
See, okay, I kind of thought, I knew that they weren't going to like end up together or anything, but like he had such a fixation on him.
Correct.
Didn't seem to be interested in any girls like growing up.
Correct.
And also like near the very end when it's talking about like later in life, Nath will like remember this moment at the pier where he like punched Jack.
Yes.
And he'll like remember this, and he's like, and Nath will look at the bump on Jack's nose and want to like reach out and touch it. And I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
so they at least associate after this happens.
Mhm.
But how much do they associate? I guess I'll never know.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of, it's open ended that way. Like if Nate feels the same way, and some of the attendees yesterday were saying that we need a sequel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Because they need to know what happens with Nate and Jack
I
and
just
Hannah
need
and
them-
everybody.
I just
So
need them to be happy.
Yeah.
That's like a kind of a common plot point though, like where you just feel that just that hate, that
Yeah.
rage towards this person, and you can't understand why.
Yeah.
And then it's like there's so many books
It's
I've
just
read like
passion.
that, and it's like, boo boo, you're gay. It's
Yeah.
fine.
It's
It's
okay.
okay
That's
to
what
feel
that
those
is,
feelings.
Fine, yeah. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Lydia. So, okay, so this is an important question. So, what do you think of Lydia as a character? Was she a victim of circumstances, or was she complicit in her own struggles?
Ooh, that's hard because on one hand she's a teenager, you
Correct,
know.
correct.
I don't know.
I mean,
that's so
it's a good
I mean,
question.
like she went through some trauma. Like when she was just like, I just want my mom back. Like if she's back, I would literally do whatever she wants me to do. Like I can't imagine having that type of feeling.
And
then
have
so
that
like
play
when
out.
and then so she does come back. So she's kind of like, okay, I gotta keep my promise and do this, see this through the way that my mom wanted to see it.
But does it change for you at all if, because we were talking about communication, right? Had they just communicated? Would it change for you at all if Lydia, when she was much younger, had just told her mom, I don't like to do those things? Because she kept up the facade for so long, and now she's a teenager, and the mom's like, oh, she loves it.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
she's like, the fact that she is so young, she's like 5 years old when
Yeah.
her mom starts like funneling her hopes of becoming like a doctor or like an accomplished woman into her.
Mhm.
I feel like she really didn't have a chance.
Yeah.
You know,
That makes
because
sense.
you were saying earlier, it's weird for like the middle child to get so much attention compared to the others. I don't agree. I feel like the youngest is like famously like gets attention,
Mhm.
but I feel like the middle child gets attention in the form of expectations the
Oh,
most.
okay.
You know, I feel like oldest child also because it's
Sure.
like you're the oldest,
You're
you're
the
the most
oldest.
responsible. But the middle child, I feel like as a like oldest child, like there's more rebellion there, so you kind of latch on to like, okay, but the younger one, the one who's like old enough, like she has potential, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that potential really can end up like suffocating a kid just because like they, especially because Lydia had the added baggage of like, oh, my promise that I would do whatever she wants is what brought my mom back.
Mhm.
There's like a psychological
Yeah.
association with like, if I please my mom, she'll never leave.
Yeah.
You know? And she's so lonely
Yeah.
that her family is really all that she has. And she's willing to give up so many parts of herself until eventually it breaks, no
Mhm.
matter how many clues
Mhm.
that she's giving, like fake smiles, talking about like, Nath knowing from like the get-go that like this kind of pressure is gonna crush her. Like she was happy when I pushed her into the water. Like she breathed a sigh of relief when I
Yeah.
pushed her in the water. And like the fact that Nath knew, but her parents were so blind to that fact, I feel like she really didn't have a chance.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But
Mhm.
as a quick follow-up, speaking of her and Nate's relationship, so she cared about him a lot. It's pretty obvious. But could she have done more or said more about the fact that, Nate and Hannah were just being neglected. All the pressure was on her. And Nate even tells her, like, when he's away at college for that visit, he's like, oh, well, you need me now. What do you want? Blah, blah, blah. So do you think she just didn't pay attention and didn't realize she was getting all the attention? Or, do you think she could have done more to tell her parents, like, hey, Nate has done X, Y, Z? Because the part that really kind of upset me was when he gets accepted into Harvard.
Mhm.
It's a super exciting moment. And then she comes in and basically says, I'm failing. and just takes
Yeah.
the shine away from him. And then he's like, Jesus Christ, like I can't even have this moment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
So-
mean, I don't know. She's kind of used to it, like used to all the attention, and she probably doesn't even think of him, honestly. She's
Yeah.
probably just really self-centered and just really thinking about her own self, that she's not thinking about her other siblings and what kind of attention that they're getting. She
Mhm.
probably doesn't realize it.
Okay.
She they do mention that like she depends on Nate though. Like
She does.
he's
Yeah.
like her
Keeper?
not quite confidant, but like
Her rock.
I guess
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Like that's the one thing that kind of anchors her to like the present.
Yeah.
Because we don't really quite see her like develop a personality. Like she's just there. It's almost
Mhm.
like she's a vessel for other people's, projections and stuff.
Sure.
So when she finally like kind of realizes that she's losing Nate,
Mm-hmm.
that was, I don't know, that was like a no point, no turning back at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see it as necessarily like her interrupting and being like, "Hey, I'm failing physics." I don't really see it as her like consciously being like, "I'm no longer getting the attention." I see it as her being like, "I'm trying everything in my power to make Nath leaving for Harvard not real.
Yeah.
I need us to stop talking about this." Because
Mhm.
like she was ripping up his letters,
Yeah.
like she was
Mhm.
hiding his letters, because she was just like such in denial of like this person that I've been dependent on to keep me afloat. Terrible pun, I'm sorry. This person that I have been depending on my entire life to like divert my mom's like attention whenever she's like going way too hard on me, and someone who have actually like felt like myself around, unlike anybody else, like is leaving. I feel like it is just a moment of like, oh no, he did find out. I was trying so hard to hide it from him. Oh God, what do I do to get us to stop talking about
Yeah.
this? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
No,
was-
I see that too.
It was kind of sad to see, like, even though it wasn't like super obvious, but like each kid was just kind of trying to make their parents happy. Because even Nate, who he was gonna go off to his own thing,
Mhm.
study space. There was that one point where he was like, I have to get into Harvard. I have to get into Harvard because that's
Yeah.
what my dad would want. He's like, I could go to Caltech. I could go to
Mhm.
MIT, whatever. It has to be Harvard. It
Yeah.
has to be Harvard because that's what my dad wants. And then
Mhm.
obviously Lydia. And even Hannah, even though she was like out of the way, she still, like y'all mentioned earlier, like realized that she needed to be out of the way because that's what her parents would want.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So it was just sad to see like each kid had their own.
Baggage.
Yeah.
So how do you think? So let's talk about the family and how they reacted to Lydia's death. How did their individual responses reveal the different dynamics within the family? Like, so the mom, for example, wanted more of an
Answers.
investigation,
Yeah.
and she's like, she didn't kill herself. Basically, there's no way. And the dad was just like, no, stop, let them do their job.
Mhm.
Like, he almost seemed like he didn't want to do more. But I think in some small way he kind
knew.
of knew,
Mhm.
or at least had an idea that that was a possibility. So what do y'all think about that?
I think James was taking on a lot of the burden of actually having been the one who saw the body.
Mm-hmm.
He saw it like with the most clarity out of everyone in the family. She is dead. That was her. Like, I saw her dead body. I know exactly. Like, I read the autopsy report.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was moving on to a different state of grief
Okay.
Mhm.
faster than everyone else because he had to kind of speed run the whole, like, getting through the denial process because he saw what he saw and he was like, as opposed to Marilyn, who didn't see it, and James was keeping that from her, like the autopsy and like what her body looked like, because
Yeah.
he didn't want to upset her.
Mm-hmm.
Marilyn, who already had all of these really lofty expectations of what her daughter was like, what she was going to become, she felt the denial process the hardest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because she was like, there is absolutely no way Lydia would have gone out there. My girl is smarter than going
Yeah.
out to where she can't swim.
Mhm.
Someone must, she's just very protective of her to the point that she's like, the only way that she could be taken away from me is because somebody else wanted to take her
Yeah.
from me.
I feel like that's how typically a lot of moms would see it as
Mhm.
well. Like they wouldn't be able to grasp the fact that their children were depressed or like going through issues, They're like, no, she wasn't sad or she
Mhm.
wouldn't do that to herself. I feel like that's something a lot of them are blind to.
Yeah.
So they choose to go that route. Like, no, someone pressured them. Someone did something to them.
I feel like it's terrible to say, but that's probably a fairly natural reaction to
Mhm,
have,
mhm.
I think with the mom, like you were mentioning, Lewis, it's more like you said, like my daughter's too smart to go out there and do that. I think in the mom saw herself like saw Lydia as like a reincarnation of herself. So it was
Mhm.
like, I'm too smart to go out there. I wouldn't have done that. But in reality, it's like this is your kid. She's a teen.
Yeah.
She's going through, clearly some mental health issues and just having a horrible time in life right now at this age. And yeah, she did it. And then, like you said, the denial was quick. You know what I mean? Like somebody had to have murdered her, and that wasn't the case.
Even
So,
when she found the cigarettes and the condoms in Lydia's bag, she was still like, "Oh, those had to be planted.
Yeah.
Like, not
Yeah.
my baby girl."
Yeah.
correct. It was kind of sad. The mom just was in denial about everything.
Yeah.
But okay, so the ending of Everything I Never Told You is open-ended. So what do you think happens to the Lee family after the final pages?
I honestly think that like the way that things are summed up with Nath in the end is probably like the best indication into like how the rest of the family ends up moving on with their lives, and
Mhm.
that they just go on like as normal as they can be, but they always carry Lydia's memory with them. Like Nath makes it, he becomes an astronaut, he makes it up to space, and he looks down at the earth, and just like every other major moment in his life past Lydia's death, he thinks of her, you know. And it's just like I feel like she is going to haunt their lives like forever,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know. But I feel like maybe this is wishful thinking, but maybe they at least start, you know, I know they start paying attention to Hannah a lot more.
Yeah.
But also like I feel like maybe they start talking a bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe not like to like family therapy
Mhm.
extent, but I feel like maybe they might listen to each other
Yeah.
more and be excited for Nathan when he talks about space instead of slapping him James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't the parents also kind of rekindle their like relationship as well when they have that like moment with
Yeah.
each other when they're passionate again?
Yeah.
So the dad leaves to be with Louisa. That he leaves the house, and the mom's there crying with Hannah. And then but then for me, it was like literally from one page to the next. James is just back. He walks in, and it was really sad because Hannah's already probably like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old, and he's like, "Hey, you know what I used to do with Lydia?
Mhm.
I used to put her on my back." And I'm like, dude, like she's 9 or 10 already, and you're barely doing that now. For me, I guess what bothered me is the thinking about whether Marilyn just takes him back, right? It's like, okay, are you back in my life now? Like that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I mean, is James just back to being husband and father with like, okay, I don't want to say it's a blessing, but Lydia's death certainly might have saved that family's, I guess, togetherness, for lack of a better word. I don't know. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
that was go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say that was kind of like definitely sudden. Like they even mention it to a point where it's like they never talk about this like dark period again where James had the affair and left. I don't know if that's like it's kind of cautiously optimistic. Like, yay, the family kind of got their stuff
Yeah.
together, but also it's like there's other things I have. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see it kind of like as a, would I have taken him back? Probably not.
Yeah.
But also I feel like again, I'm judging it by like a more modern standard. I feel like if you are going through grief and you've already witnessed like how the family does when one or the other parent is gone, and like James and Marilyn do still have a deep love for each other. It's just been buried under all of this grief and all of this, like their marriage getting kind of like stale, for lack of a better word. I feel like by the time that like they are really put to the test in terms of their marriage specifically, not just like their family integrity, I feel like by the time he comes back and he's saying like, it's not too late, which parallels what Lydia was thinking before she died. Like, it's not too late to turn my life around. Whenever he comes back, I feel like maybe she doesn't forgive him for the affair, but they are at least looking at each other like, why did I ever think that I wasn't going to choose you? You know? And I again, wishful thinking, but hopefully they talk about the whole like where they were both coming from in terms of being like, let's pretend this never happened. But you know, maybe they don't talk about it and they're just like, maybe it's just, you know, more financially stable for us to be together. And like, we want to be like more cynical about it, which could have happened.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
societal norms would dictate that I mean, they're already going through this period of like, okay, it's late 70s, early 80s. There's a lot of race and racism involved. Like separating this family, breaking it up would be even harder on the kids.
Mhm.
How is the world going to perceive us, right? We're already a mixed family. Like, I think it
Mhm.
was more the pressure of like, we just got to make it work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether they actually really gave a crap to be together in the end or not,
Mhm.
it was more about just like, I think we got to do this for the sake of our sanity, our families being together. I don't, that was my thought process.
Mhm.
So
What worries me most is Hannah, because it's like that bit where he was like, "Oh, what I used to do with Lydia," you know, and it's like y'all forgot y'all have a whole ass other daughter
Yeah.
up
Yep.
until you realize like, oh,
There you are.
She's right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, cautiously optimistic, but my worry would be that they kind of start projecting again without realizing
Yeah.
it, especially because Nate's gone. He's
Yeah.
going to be leaving. She's
Yeah.
going to be the only child.
Correct.
I don't think they're going to like try to be like, let's have another child.
Is
you
that
know?
escapable? I mentioned earlier, I was like, if I have kids, would I put my generational trauma on them? Like, just not knowingly?
Yeah.
Lewis said yes.
I
Oof.
I think that
That's a good point.
to just put it the way that like I put it earlier though, I think that like for better or for worse, it is gonna happen just because you are a product of the way that you were raised, right? And even if you decide to like swing the pendulum the other way and be like, I am not going to parent my child the way that I was parented at all, I'm gonna make every opposite decision. You've already kind of decided to put an expectation on the child to turn out a certain way, and I feel like that's a losing game.
Mhm.
But like even just by being the person that you are, by the like as a product of how you were raised, I feel like eventually you are going to put some expectation on your child one way or another on how you want them to turn out based on how you turned out. You
Mhm.
know, I feel like it's inescapable, and it may or may not be like as severe as like pushing your expectations onto one child and trying to live vicariously through them, but it still might happen that you're just like, oh, I expected things to turn out way different and I just wasn't listening to my kid and like what they wanted, you know?
Yeah.
And now they're dead at the bottom of a lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think ultimately most parents want what's best for, or at least what they perceive as best for their child or children. But you know, putting on those additional pressures can certainly be detrimental to a child in the long run, and they can resent you for that and just turn around and be like, I don't want to be that. So, final question of the book, for the book. So, what were your overall thoughts of the book? Did you like it or dislike it?
I liked it. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Written very well.
I'm a very nonfiction book kind of person,
Same.
so reading kind of like realistic fiction is like kind of it's like the most into fiction that I can get, really. I do think I'm going to forget that I read it. Like I said earlier, like by the time the year's over, I might completely forget to put this on Goodreads. But also, I enjoyed it while I was listening to it. It was compelling while I was listening to it, and I think that's valuable enough, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was like I was saying, is like if I rated it out of 5 stars, I gave it a 3 on Goodreads. It's not, it wasn't a bad book at all. It certainly wasn't my favorite. I mostly do nonfiction as well, but it was written well. I think maybe for me, because of how I thought the book was going to go initially, because it was like murder mystery in my mind at first, and then it just didn't go that way. Yeah, it was like, oh man, like this was not what it was. But
Plot twist, it was Hannah.
Correct.
She killed Lydia.
She pushed her.
That's what you wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was engaging enough. Like it made me want to keep reading to figure out like, okay, how is this gonna wrap up? What's gonna happen?
Sure.
I'd probably say like 3.5 as well. Again, well written. I like that we got a lot of time with each character. It didn't quite feel like most were neglected.
Sure.
Sorry, Hannah. But
Yeah.
overall, I think we got a nice little story about some generational trauma, and it was a good read.
Yeah. I will say, just to throw in one thing, book experience for me, I would say 3.5 out of 5 sounds good. But imagery was 5 out of 5. Like the imagery was probably what gripped me the most in the book, and I might revisit it just for that.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to end it here for us. Make sure you tune into our next Libros and Libations recap for A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I apologize if I butchered that. But that one's going to be a little bit of a long one, so you need to start as soon as you end this podcast.
You should have started yesterday.
You should have started before, you went on holiday leave and all of that.
Absolutely.
But be sure to tune in for that episode, as well as any other little surprises we have coming up. Again, we did tease 8 Billion Genies coming out soon, so make sure you look for that as well. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you for listening to, again, our first episode of the new year. Happy 2025 to everyone. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
I'm Lewis.
And I'm Romeo.
And we'll catch you on the next episode.